Jim Simpson, investigative reporter and author.
Oh, did I miss you both?
Did you talk about it?
Yeah, I did. Were you
You did.
in the men's room?
You went in.
Yeah. I was indisposed.
I did.
Shall we say.
I did. What, mention it again.
Don't get too close to the speaker.
Mention it, here it is.
Okay.
Right here, I just took this. The red-green axis.
Thank you.
Right, I think there's one opened on the table.
Yeah, that's the one I use.
That's the one you used?
That's for, don't worry about it.
Okay.
So, evening everybody. How y'all doing? You'll get over it. Well, Marie mentioned my book, and this is the second edition of my Red Green Axis book. This represents 2 years of study and research on this issue, primarily regarding immigration, but I delve deeply into the strategies behind it, the people behind it, how those strategies were developed over time. It's the best book I've ever written, frankly. And so I urge you to consider getting your own copy. I'll sign it for an additional fee. Kidding. And there's plenty of copies in the back, and I will sign it. So, first things first. I recently took a DNA test, and I found out that I'm 1/32,000th Cherokee.
You and Liz.
So, me and my new BFF, Elizabeth Warren, decided we were going to don our headdress and go visit our Cherokee brethren and sisters. And as you can see, I put on my Antifa war paint in the red and black. And she put on, well, of course it had to be LGBTQ war paint. Why else? What else would you do, right? So we drove to the airport in her white Cherokee. And we got in my plane, which was a Piper Cherokee, and we flew off to the Cherokee Nation. And surprise of all surprises, they didn't welcome us at all. We were lucky to get away with our lives. So I thought about it and I thought, well, wait a minute, let me check that DNA thing again. Oh my gosh, I had it messed up. I'm not an American Indian. My name is Mahatma Gandhi. And I own a donut shop in Bethpage. And I had to do this because Vice President Joe Biden told me if I was going to be an Indian in the United States, I had to have a donut shop. And I've become very, very popular and famous in Bethpage. So I want to marry 105 women simultaneously. And then I thought, well, gee, if I can claim to be Mahatma Gandhi, or a Cherokee, or a black man when I'm not black, obviously, or a female, why not a different species? How about a transgender aardvark? Anyway, that probably cost more than it was worth to create, but it's pretty funny. So, the red-green axis, and of course, I always go through this part in the beginning, even though I think you guys saw this little intro last year. The red, of course, started with Marx and Lenin, and how many people know or remember who the guy in the middle was, Nechayev? Hands? Marie knows. Be quiet. Don't steal my thunder. And the green, of course, is Islam. Represented most prominently by the Muslim Brotherhood, that's their flag, and the Organization for Islamic Cooperation. So, and the axis is an asymmetric strategy for military conquest. And I have to always emphasize that, because they're not just seeking power. This is a movement to overthrow our nation. That's how serious it is, and that's what we are witnessing today, and they have made great strides in this. Well, actually, and I had just had a very up-close and personal experience with just how powerful and evil these people are. I'm flying off to Michigan on Thursday for a week-long speaking tour, and the first speech was supposed to be at a large, very large Baptist church in Bloomington Hills, Bloomfield Hills. And a local, now this is a Fox local channel, heard about it. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell protested that there were these haters and Islamophobes. I'm going there with Shahram Hadian. I don't know if you've heard him. He's an extremely good former Muslim. Now he's a very strong Christian pastor and an amazing speaker. You guys should have him here if you could. But anyway, the two of us were going to speak, and the news found out about it. And these congresswomen complained about it. And so Fox went and interviewed the pastor. They actually called me first, and I said, how the hell did you get my phone number? Because it was my cell phone number. It turns out it was just, she looked it up on the internet. Somebody had posted my cell phone number. But anyway, I gave her plenty of pithy quotes that she could have used, and I guarantee you she did not use one of them. She interviewed the pastor, and the pastor, trusting, as pastors can be, or usually are, believed that they would faithfully reproduce his message and only edit it for space. Well, of course, what they did instead was cherry pick 2 or 3 of the worst statements that he made, taken completely out of context. And that threw everything into kilter. The elders of the church canceled the event. And I sent them a very detailed email addressed to all of them, expressing why that was exactly the wrong thing to do. At this time, I mean at any time, but this time, where everything we do or don't do depends, or everything we do or don't do determines how successful these groups are going to be in overthrowing us. And I changed their minds.
Wow.
And the next morning, and I called them also. And of course, I can't take sole credit. The pastor was 100% behind us, and he was upset that they had outvoted him. And there were a couple of elders that really wanted it, but they were concerned about security. And they had this school attached to them, and the parents from the school were calling and complaining. And so, but I called every one of them, and I talked to, not all of them because they weren't there, but called, and the following morning, they unanimously decided to go forward with the event. Many slips between the cup and the lip, because the school decided they would not put up with that and threatened to sue them.
Oh my God.
And as it stands right now, they're not going to have it. And that's probably not going to change. In fact, the reason I was outside was because one of those guys called to talk to me about it. And so that's the kind of situation we're facing. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, and some of the people behind it. But right now, let's go back to the beginning and talk about Sergei. He was 22 years old when he wrote something called the Revolutionary Catechism. And he's the most influential revolutionary that nobody's ever heard of. And the Revolutionary Catechism is 3 pages long. You look it up on the internet and read it in a minute. It anticipated and drew the outlines of all subsequent communist revolutions. Read what he says here. This is towards us, he says, seeking only the happiness of the masses. The Society of Revolutionaries will use all its resources and energy towards increasing and intensifying the evils and miseries of the people until at last their patience is exhausted and they're driven to a general uprising. Doesn't that sound like what's going on today? It's exactly what's going on today. Constant provocation, constant agitation, constant lies, constant chaos. Yeah. And it has a purpose. And it's literally to force us to either utterly capitulate or revolt. Now, the implication there is that they are ready for the revolt. Something to think about. It's a multi-front strategy that the red-green axis is engaged in. Mass immigration to erase identity, stealing elections, well, you can read it. All of it, all of it, all dedicated to that one agenda. Now, I go a great deal into this issue in the book. Demographics is destiny. That was something that a leftist said to George Soros and other fat cat Democrat donors at a private meeting. And then they reiterated that after the 2018 election, when there were so many close elections in districts like, for example, Ted Cruz, and so many others, where there should not have been a Democrat win, or there should not have been such a close race. It's because demographics is destiny, and they are working night and day to register as many minorities as they can to vote. In fact, Trevor Loudon says that there are the Democratic Socialists of America's goal is to register 40 million people for the 2020 election. So we have our work cut out for us. You know, Ken said that I talk some about the things we can do. Well, the things that we can do fall directly out of what we see them doing. And one of the things that we have to do is organize, register people to vote, and get people to the polls. Have to do it in record numbers. Here's another statistic for you. So many of these races could have been won overwhelmingly. For example, in Minnesota, where Keith Ellison, you know him, he won the Attorney General seat, and now he's turning that position into a weapon against conservatives in Minnesota. He won by 90,000 votes. 500,000 Republicans in Minnesota stayed home. 500,000 did not vote. There are 40 million Christians who either do not vote or are not registered to vote. 15 million of them are not even registered to vote. That's a game changer, right? The deal is getting them off their butts and getting them to the polls. There's one solution. So let's see, how do we put this down a little bit, Ken, because it's kind of...
I'm not sure that we can, unless we can tilt it. Let me try. Can you reach it? There you go. There you go, too far.
It's okay. Just pull the screen out.
Perfect.
Let's see.
Good enough.
Yeah, what was that?
So, yeah, these are just some stats I put up. These are all in the book, although I updated this one. You can look at the 1986 amnesty and see what that did. But as you can see, there's a constant trend of legal permanent residence. We get over 1 million legal permanent residents every year. And, you know, all the business folks and the establishment Republicans claim that's because we need employees. Well, in 2016, only 12% of those people who are legal permanent residents came in for employment reasons. Almost all of the rest came for family reunification, which is a polite way of saying chain migration. And there's so many other issues. Visa overstays, 700,000 a year. Visa waiver overstays, over 100,000 a year. We don't even know where those people are, because they don't need a visa to get in. Temporary protected status, 417,000. Many of those people have been here since the late 90s. Supposed to be a program where you have an 18-month window to stay in the United States legally if you have natural disaster or war or something in your country. But most of the people here came here in the 90s or the early aughts due to mudslides, bad weather in Central America, and of course the war. And they're still here. They just keep extending their stay, and nobody stops them. Trump tried once. Apprehensions and inadmissibles, they've come down. I saw Charlie Kirk put out a thing from TPS USA celebrating the fact that there were only 50,000 illegal aliens apprehended at the border in the most recent month. And well, it's a heck of a lot better than 100,000, but that's what it was at the peak in 2014. When we had another similar surge. So we are nowhere out of the woods yet with that. The migrant caravans are supported by, and actually they were created, developed by this network of leftist organizations, both in Central America and here. And one of the biggest promoters of this, who people are down there on the ground in Central America, is the United Nations. 5 separate UN agencies, including UNICEF, UNESCO, and the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, down there training people how to approach Border Patrol, providing them buses to the border, providing them places to stay, providing them food. This is a highly organized thing, just as what is happening in Western Europe is a highly organized thing. And I've just listed some of these here. And I put this up, this is in the book, but I put this up because this is very interesting. We pay 37% of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees budget. We pay 37%. We pay about 20% of its overall budget, but we pay 37% of the budget for the UN High Commissioner. And by comparison, Russia and China contribute 4% of the total, and 0.4%, a couple of $1 million, for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. And who are the big beneficiaries of this mass influx of people? They are. Right. Because we are their enemy, and this mass influx is destabilizing, fracturing our nation, and dividing us along racial and ethnic and every line you can think of. They are the beneficiaries. And in fact, in 2.0, I go deeply into the history of the UN and how, you know, Alger Hiss, you've all heard of Alger Hiss, or most of you anyway, most famous trader in the United States. There's many more, but he's probably the most well-known. He and 16 other communists and Council on Foreign Relations members wrote the UN Charter. And every UN Secretary General from the very beginning has been either a socialist or a communist. And so is it any wonder why we have a UN that seems to be just against us everywhere and always? It is. You know, I was talking to Claire Lopez. A lot of you may know Claire. I work with Claire. And she was talking about the situation on the Golan Heights and how UNIFIL gets in the way there. And I said, well, I think it's a little more than that. UNIFIL doesn't merely get in the way. UNIFIL runs interference for Hezbollah. They run interference. And by their very presence, it makes it difficult to take military action against Hezbollah, just like it is difficult to take military action against Hamas when they're seated among all the civilians. It's the same thing. And UNIFIL has been there for decades. They have not accomplished a single thing. They never side with Israel. Why on earth are we paying them anything? You know, that's another thing that should change. You know, it's kind of difficult to imagine, but if I were king, I would sure as heck do it overnight. And this is just another shot of how absurd things are. I think it's 900 days now before you get your application, your hearing. And that's for affirmative asylum applications. And here, now this is interesting. This is the refugee resettlement program. And you see that column there. The first column is the ceiling that's decided every year by the president. And the last 2 years, he reduced that ceiling to the lowest it's ever been. And as a consequence, the number of refugees coming in has gone down to record lows. And this 2019 estimate, I think it's going to be a little higher than that. It's going to be close to the 30,000. But, and that's great news. And all of the resettlement contractors who resettle these agencies around the world, around the country, like U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which they don't like to call themselves that anymore. Now they're HIAS because Hebrew is exclusionary and old. The guy who runs it, and you know, there's one thing about left-wing Jews that a lot of people don't get this. I asked a long time ago, I asked a Jewish lady friend of mine, I said, why are so many of you Jews leftists?
Because they're
And
not
she looked at me and
Jews.
said, why are so many of you WASPs leftists? I said, well, you know, she's got a point. But the fact of the matter is, people wonder why so many Jews would vote against their personal interest, right? Because, I mean, it's now overt, but we've known for a long time that the Democratic Party is virulently anti-Semitic, they're virulently anti-Israel. They would love to see Israel wiped off the map so their Palestinian friends can move in.
Right.
The reason is, and I know this and I've known it for a long time, because I've studied communists and communism for 30 years. No matter who you are, no matter what your ethnic background, if you're a communist first, period. And in fact, many of the Jewish communists that I talk about historically, like for example the founders of the Frankfurt School, came to New York City. Many of them were Jewish, not all of them, but most of them. They were very anti-Semitic. Go figure.
Like Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders. Marx hated Jews. Karl Marx, Jewish, although he was raised as a Christian, but he was born, came from a Jewish family, hated Jews. And it's because, just like leftists can't stand Christianity, they don't like anything that has the word God in it. Because they see themselves as God. They want to be God. They want to replace God. It's a story that's as old as the Garden of Eden. They shall be as gods. That's what they want. That's their thing. Anyway, so the refugee resettlement program is a mite bit of good news, right? Well, except the refugee resettlement program is not the refugee resettlement program. This is the refugee resettlement program.
That's what I thought.
Yep. It not only includes refugees, it includes a category called special immigrant visas. Oop. Oh, what did I do here? Cuban Haitian entrants, asylum seekers, trafficking victims, and you don't need to take that picture if you don't want to, because I can provide you guys with a PDF of this thing, and whoever wants it can have it. All this stuff's in the book also. In fact, I have this same table going all the way back to 1980. So that's and nobody's ever done that for this. So, all of these groups, down from the high of the Obama administration, 269,000, but still 136,000, which is a heck of a lot more than 22,000, right?
Right.
And here's just a snapshot of the budget. And the interesting thing about this, now we have overseas contingency operations, and that's been zeroed out. We could get really hopeful about that, but actually they just put it in a different program. So it's no longer part of that. It hasn't, the dollar amount hasn't reduced. The refugee admissions number has gone down. But look at this. Of all the refugee resettlement programs, which one gets more money than any of them? It's the illegal alien minors, the unaccompanied alien children. That's the biggest program in the refugee resettlement program. Now here are the grants for the voluntary agencies, the misnamed name for the resettlement contractors. I have all their acronyms there. Church World Service, that's the Methodist Church, or no, that's Episcopal Church. This is the Ethiopian Community Development Council, HIAS, International Rescue Committee, Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, Conference of Catholic Bishops, Committee for Refugees and Immigrants, and World Relief. IRC, they've all gone down substantially in 2018, although not as much as you would think, given the massive reduction in refugees that have come in. And there are a number of reasons for that. But the two biggies are the International Rescue Committee and the Catholic bishops. And then we have UAC contractor grants. These are the illegal alien minor contractors. That's the Baptist Child and Family Services. 2018, they made $440 million. And then this one, Southwest Key, made $626 million.
What did they do with it?
That's a good question. I'd like to know. I might want to drive in that limo, you know. No, what they spend it on is housing for these people. They're the ones who house all these people as they come in. And then they turn them over to the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which funnels them off into different communities around the country. And the whole thing is very subversive, because they claim to find either family members, legal family members who are here will take them in, or somebody else to take them in as a family. But I believe that a lot of them go to their illegal alien parents and relatives who are already here, because it's very difficult to find out where they go. They won't tell you what town they're in. They won't tell you how many are in the town. They will tell you how many go in each state. But that's about as detailed as they get.
But the bulk of it is all during the Obama administration,
No.
when it really goes, when it starts going up.
Oh, no, that's absolutely true. Yes, it really started, the big upswing in illegal aliens surging the border, especially the minors, was it started in 2012, and then there was a peak in 2014, and then it fell down a little bit in 2015, went back up in 2016, 2017, it started to go down, but then when they figure out President Trump couldn't prevent these people from coming in because of all of the Obama judges who blocked everything that he did, they skyrocketed, and that's when that thing really became an organized invasion. I mean, it was organized from the beginning. It didn't just start to happen because these people live in bad conditions. They've lived in bad conditions for decades. You have a question?
Jim, is there any truth to the rumors or fact that Obama was bringing people in the dead of night to airports?
Well, yes.
Sneaking them in off
Yeah.
the books?
Yeah.
That wouldn't be reflected in numbers?
Yeah. No, I think, I don't know that was, I don't think that happened. I mean, and I think a lot of that was done to avoid the conflicts and the controversy that would come if these people were being shipped around, during the day.
What was the question?
She asked if the Obama administration was bringing people in the dead of night,
Oh,
and
okay.
the answer is yes, but they're also bringing them around during the day too. Yeah.
Jim,
Yeah.
while we're on the topic of immigration, I've always wondered about how things work, right? In
Yep.
this one. So Trump has got Mexico slowing down, they're doing a little bit more to slow things down, but I don't hear anybody's arresting the coyotes, so we still have people coming over. It seemed to me one way to do it would be just arrest those people and make it so you don't want to go into the business of ferrying people over. I don't hear that's happening. And then there's the same thing with the war on drugs. Again, there's the drug cartel and all. But why don't we just help Mexico declare war on them, finish them off, and be done with it?
Yeah,
Because they're
it's a great question, it's a great idea. I'm all for it. I mean, I believe frankly, in terms of the war on drugs, Mexico is so corrupt they couldn't pull it off. I mean, Mexico has really been corrupted by drug money. I mean, it's always been corrupt. It's always been socialist, by the way. It's always been corrupt. Socialism breeds corruption.
So we're
But-
corrupt too, they just have it on the table, we're under the table, that's the only difference that I see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, they have a lot of both these days. And I would say in terms of arresting coyotes, I don't know. I don't know.
In the deal, they cut a deal.
Maybe they did. Maybe they're just slick at making sure they stay on the Mexican side of the border.
No,
No?
a deal. They cut a deal. Because the cartel is on the other side.
Oh, well,
of
they
the
kind of
fence.
deal with the cartels, yes.
Right,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
cartel.
No, they're part of the
Machine guns
cartel.
on the other side.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about that.
Right.
But they were all armed on the border on
Yeah.
the other side.
Yep, that's right.
So you can't arrest them.
It would be difficult. I think we should do what Pershing did. we should invade, just go down and take the whole country over. I mean, really, you know, it's to the point where we have to take extreme action. It really is getting to that point. And I just hope somebody comes to that realization before it's too late. So, and now this, I had the, I put these up and I circled these numbers for a specific reason. Like, for example, if you look at the Catholic bishops, they only made $55 million in 2018. I mean, it's money I could use, I won't argue that, but compared to what they made in the past, it's not that much. Same with the IRC. In the prior 2 years, they made over 100 million, right? But now look at this. The U.S. conference made 55 million resettling refugees in 2018. But they contract with the federal government for all kinds of things. So in total, they made 561 million in 2018 alone. And since 2008, they've taken in $4.3 billion from the government. Do you ever wonder why the Catholics, the Catholic Church has become so corrupted and veered so hard left? Well, there's your answer. They're getting paid. That's how they make their big money these days. They're getting paid. The same thing with Catholic charities. Where's Catholic charities? They only made 14 million resettling illegal alien children. But in 2018, their total take was 118 million because they run all kinds of welfare programs funded by the federal government in all the various dioceses around the country. It's, yeah, and it's huge. And IRC, the same thing. Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service also does both refugee resettlement and illegal alien resettlement. And then they have the Lutheran Social Services Organization, which is just another branch of the Lutheran Church. So they're making a lot of money through a lot of different vehicles. And the answer to this, okay, the answer to this is to completely abolish the funding system. Would require abolishing or substantially abolishing or substantially revising the 1980 Refugee Act. Because that's where this came from. And you know, very interestingly, part of the rationalization for the 1980 Refugee Act was, of course, the huge influx of Vietnamese, right, from the boat people. Well, guess what? Democrats did not want those people here. In fact, Jerry Brown, who was governor then, attempted to stop an Air Force plane from landing at Travis Air Force Base filled with refugees. And they would say, well, we don't have enough jobs, our cities can't handle it, we don't have enough in the budget, all these. And what was the real truth? These were people fleeing communism. They were not going to be voting Democrat. And then here are the leaders of these various contractors and how much money they make. Look at what the head of Southwest Key makes, John Juan Sanchez. He makes almost $800,000 a year.
Wow.
And all he does is administer a grant. I mean, this is stuff you could do in your sleep. Fill out forms, delegate to other people, and he's an extreme leftist. He partners with groups like the Latin American, LULAC, and the National Council of La Raza, which now it's called Unidos US, and others. The Baptists, boy, that's a pretty good hefty salary for a Baptist, isn't it? $500,000 bucks, I like that. David Miliband, the former leftist labor leader, now heads IRC, almost $700,000 a year. It's incredible. Now there's a whole section in the book called Diversity is Not Our Strength. That sounds racist. Well, I tell you what, when the left says diversity is our strength, and they keep repeating that slogan over and over and over again, they mean it, because it is their strength. Because most of those people that they're bringing in, those diverse people, many of whom don't speak English, who are very needy, heavily welfare dependent, are guaranteed Democrat voters. That's what it's all about.
Diversity in everything but thought.
Yes. And here's a snapshot of how that is played out. Texas, I bet you didn't know this, Texas is a majority nation, state now. 60% minority. And all Texas needs to do to turn dark blue is to register all those unregistered Hispanics. Only about 20% of them are registered. So guess who's down there right now registering voters to beat the band and engage in massive vote fraud? They even sent out voter registration cards to hundreds of thousands of people, including legal aliens. They're legal, but they can't vote, with the U.S. citizenship box checked. And the only reason the state found out about it, because one of these legal aliens said, "Oh, has the law changed? Can I vote now?" And, "No, you can't vote." Why you ask that? Hundreds of thousands. California, well, California's dead and gone. Arizona, see why it's getting close to being blue. Florida, same thing. Georgia, 52%. And the U.S. population has steadily gone down. We're headed in that direction too. They all say demographics is destiny. They all say it to themselves, and they say it's just a waiting game. We'll just wait you guys out, and we will have our permanent majority. Here's another aspect and the reason why diversity is not our strength. Look at how many languages are spoken in public school, over 400. And some of these different cities, I mean, look at Federal Way, Washington, 120 different languages spoken in public high school. 30% of the student body. How do you manage that? How do you teach students to speak 120 different languages? Some of them don't even have interpreters. Some of them are unknown languages, formerly unknown languages. And illegal alien crime, don't let anybody tell you illegal alien crime is not off the charts. It is. And this comes right out of the General Accounting Office, or the Government Accountability Office is called now. Published this last summer, and I got these statistics directly from them. 9,000 illegal aliens imprisoned as of 2015 in those 5 states for homicide. 9,000. That's over 9,000 Kate Steinleys. You know, I hear these people plea for the plight of this poor illegal alien who won't be able to see his son or daughter this Christmas because he's in jail because he got caught at the border. And I say, where is your humanity? Yes, sir.
Yeah, do you have the number or an estimate of the number of the percentage of illegal aliens in those states? Because it's one thing to show a number, it's another thing to show that 1% of the population is committing 10% of the crimes.
I do, but here's the problem. Those official statistics are wrong. You know, the official statistics are that there's 11.5 million illegal aliens in the country. There's 30 million illegal aliens in the country. And nobody's parsed that out. I suppose you could prorate each state based on the percentage that they have.
But even if you took their numbers, it would look even worse.
It would look bad. It would actually not look as bad, because if you take the official numbers, the illegal alien crime is 2 to 3 times.
No, the math is opposite, because if they're only showing a third of the number of the people, and that number of the crime, it's gonna look 3 times worse.
So it's high.
Well, anyway, I used to have that table. But I didn't put it here. Here is one, though, that gets at that issue for you.
20%.
Oh, here we go.
Here's one that gets at that issue for you. Sir? I forget his name.
Right.
Ray. Here's a table that gets at that issue for you.
But I'm saying it goes on that other chart, because 2% of the
No,
population
I
is
know.
committing
I
20%
know
of
what
the
you're saying.
crimes.
I know what you're saying. And I can show you that table. But for example, in Arizona, they provide the number of citizens and the number of criminal aliens imprisoned at a given month, and they change this every month, for a whole list of crimes. Look at this, kidnapping. 18% of those in prison, of the total prison population, are illegal aliens who have been arrested for kidnapping. 12.5% of the prison population have been imprisoned for murder. 12.5% of the total prison population. I don't care what the percentage is in the general population. That's gigantic. And you can see it's like that with practically everything. And then we get to the welfare part. And as Ken related earlier, 70% are on welfare. Well, here's the chart that shows the breakdown of what they're on welfare with. Food stamps, almost 100% the first year. 74.5% over 5 years. And for the first time, and I credit Trump for this, the Health and Human Services Department put out what they expend for refugees and asylum seekers for welfare. And it comes out to $125 billion for 10 years, or $12.5 billion a year. And that comes out to about $3,000 per refugee. But now watch this.
That's just welfare, though.
Watch this. Here's what they don't include. So, supplemental security income is an additional $2,000. Food stamps an additional $1,000. Federal housing addition $500,000, or no, $500,000. So you're right there. You've more than doubled the cost per refugee to over $6,000. What do you think it would cost per refugee when you added all those up?
You have that figure?
15? No, I don't. Oh, that would take. Give me a full year's salary and a library where I can cloister myself and study it. No, I mean, I've worked on these issues for a long time. It used to be my job when I worked in the Office of Management and Budget, and it's a tall order to do that. Yes, ma'am.
AON also has a running tally of the cost of illegal aliens just for this year alone. It's over 100.
Yeah, no, it's about 130 billion. And that, once again, is only welfare costs. They do not calculate all these additional costs. This calculation does not include unaccompanied alien children. It includes all the other categories in that table, but not the... So, when you get it all together, you're talking, I don't know, 200 billion a year? It's, or more. Who knows?
3 or 4 billion a week.
And then you think about all of the non-money costs, like the people who are being killed, all of the destruction of our communities, the destruction of our schools. I mean, diversity is not our strength, folks. And now I'm going to change subjects entirely. I think we've gotten enough statistics for one night. I want to talk about Islamophobia.
Made up bullshit.
Because we just had a big experience with that out in Michigan. This guy, Issam Omish, is a board member of Dar al-Hijra Mosque in Falls Church, Virginia. And that's a mosque where Ayman al-Zawahiri spoke or preached. Hassan Nadal visited him there and listened to him. 2 of the 9/11 hijackers went to that mosque. This guy's also on the board of the Muslim Students Association and the Muslim American Society. He's a great big Muslim Brotherhood dude, in other words. And he's also the head of general surgery at Inova Alexandria Hospital in Northern Virginia.
That's big.
Don't lose your head over it.
Yeah.
But, so this guy is not just anybody, okay? And this is the post that he put up on his Facebook site about Islamophobia. And look at what he says. If you use the words Islamic terrorism, Islamist terrorism, Islamic violence, violent jihad, Muslim terror, any of those terms, if you just use those terms, you're an Islamophobe and you have to stop your hate. You're a hater and you're an Islamophobe. And you know, we say, well, wait a minute. There's Al-Qaeda, there's Al-Shabaab, there's ISIS, there's, what are the ones in the Philippines? I forget. Yeah, you just go on and on down the list of all these Islamic terrorist groups. Hamas, right? Hezbollah, all these are Islam. If that, and they say, oh, but they are misunderstanding Islam. They don't understand. They just think they're interpreting the Quran correctly. Well, I gotta say, if they're misinterpreting the Quran is the most widely misinterpreted religion that ever existed. Wait a minute. There's a lot of Jewish guys in here. I want the Jewish shoe bombers to line up right here. I'm looking for the Methodist underwear bombers. Come on. Come on. I'm just waiting for the Mennonite suicide bombers to show up.
The truth's killing who, Jim? That's what I asked. Who's killing who?
Yeah, right. That's a good question. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. But so, anyway, this is his layout. And this just shows you how absurd it is. But it comes directly out of the Organization for Islamic Cooperation, which has been trying to establish blasphemy codes in international law since 1990. Okay? And in 2011, 2009 UN Resolution 1618, and the way they got it through was they changed the words, you know. They didn't say blasphemy. They said combating intolerance, negative stereotyping, and stigmatization. But the key is, you will hear them talk, and people, let me see if I have this here. Yeah. Now it's embedded in the UN Migration Compact too, which actually calls for laws to be erected that would criminalize speech, any speech that is critical of migrants. And here's what a member of parliament had to say about that. It'll become a criminal offense, media outlets will be shut down, and you can see that where it says here, promote independent, objective, and quality reporting of media outlets. Sure.
Very Orwellian.
Yeah. Stopping allocation of public funding or material support to media outlets. Yeah, I'm sure that'll be even-handed. Racial and ethnic, religious profile, all they're talking about there is Islam. They don't care, they could care less, the UN, about anti-Semitism or any kind of discrimination against Christians, because they hate Christians and Jews. All this about Islam. And blasphemy laws have existed in Europe, so they're sort of they have precedents there. And there's one person, Elizabeth Savage Wolfe, who made an observation in a private meeting like this that Mohammed liked little girls, and this left-wing couple of journalists, or quote-unquote journalists, recorded the speech and took it to a judge, and the judge prosecuted her for incitement to violence. Because any criticism, whether you talk about Islamic terrorism, any of the words there on the Islamophobe list, or any negative speech about Islam at all, can be considered incitement to violence.
So what is the outcome of her case?
So she took it to the Vienna Supreme Court, and the Vienna Supreme Court violated its own standards and convicted her. So then she took it to the European Court. They convicted her. So she either has to pay a fine or go to prison for like 90 days or something. But it's the precedent. You know, they went against their own laws to prosecute her. And the prosecutor, initially she was charged with something else, and the prosecutor couldn't make that case because she wasn't speaking, she was just reciting facts. And so the judge stepped in and prosecuted her for a different offense. It's just insane.
When they take Allah to court,
What?
Allah will take him to court, the entire Quran is incitement to violence.
Right.
It's part of their religion.
Well,
They are.
yeah. You know, but see, you're talking rational. This is not rational. This is just what is. And so CARE comes out every year with something they call their Islamophobia report. And this year, they targeted the donors to their enemies. And I wrote a very detailed takedown of this report. There's one version of it at the Center for Security Policy. There's a longer version of it at the Capital Research Center. But the whole thing, it would be funny if it weren't so dangerous and weren't taken as gospel truth by the media. It's astounding. There were so many mistakes in it, so many things wrong. Here's just a few of them. They talk about a multi-billion-dollar xenophobe network. Well, where did that come from, right? Oh yeah, we're a multi-billion-dollar network of well-funded organizations intent on, pushing them all into the sea. Well, what they did was they added up 3 years. They took 3 years, and 2/3 of that 1.5 billion that they got by adding 3 years. Guess who it is? Pat Robertson's 700 Club. The Christian Broadcasting Network is 2/3 of this vast Islamophobe or xenophobe network. Yeah, and I mean, you can't get more absurd. My favorite though is, well, and I'll show you that in a little bit, but this 125 million Islamophobe network, and they identified Daniel Pipes, Frank Gaffney, Brigitte Gabriel, David Yerushalmi, David Horowitz, and Pam Geller. You know most of those and not all those people, right?
Personally.
They did not identify the organizations they were with, at least not together. So the idea was to target the individuals, right? And then they say, it's 125, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? $125 million? They don't make a smidgen of that. And they don't show how they make their math. They claim to use IRS tax returns, but they don't cite any of them. They cite nothing. And so, but I took that whole thing apart, because I'm good at that, right? And I ripped them to shreds. They talk about dark money, donor-advised funds. Well, donor-advised funds are just, like Fidelity, Schwab, Proteus. And if you want to donate, you donate, and then you tell them, well, I'd like some of this to go there, and some of this to go there, some of this. Everybody does it, right? But because some of these horrible Islamophobes get money from donor-advised funds, this is a dark money situation. Well, I point out in the report that CARE gets money from donor-advised funds. Practically every Muslim Brotherhood group gets money from donor-advised funds, and they get a hell of a lot more than we do. The whole thing is a joke. The left is funded. Well, David Horowitz did an analysis of it at one point, and of the organizations that he put together, it was 10-to-1 donors for left, for non-left. Not even right, just left versus non-left. And frankly, I think it's about 30-to-1. And they couldn't even add. They claimed that there were 39 xenophobes organization in this xenophobic network. Well, I counted them. There were 46. So they didn't even add correctly. And if you take out the 700 Club, I still can't get over that. If you take out 700 Club, the Christian Broadcasting Network, the average for all the other ones is $3 million a year, which is chicken chump change in the nonprofit. It's not enough for, it's enough for an office and a few staff members. 25 of those remaining 46, average $300,000 a year, some less than $100,000 a year. So the whole thing is fraudulent, and they get away with it because while they name all these organizations in various parts throughout they don't put them in a table, they don't show you who gets what or how much gets what, they just give you one big lump sum number and expect you to believe it all.
And it's fake news, and they hand it to the fake news media.
And the fake news media just celebrates this great, insightful report. Oh, and then I decided to put together the Red-Green Axis Network. Let's see what that looks like. So we got CARE by itself makes as much as those 6 Islamophobes. And when you add their supporters, the ACLU, the Southern Poverty Law Center, Anti-Defamation League works with them now, folks. And the Industrial Areas Foundation, that's Saul Alinsky's organization. You put them together, that's almost $1 billion a year. They have $1.6 billion in assets. So it's vastly more. Oh, and one other thing. You see this little thing down here, the Washington Trust Foundation? That manages another $5 million for CARE. And so CARE can underestimate by $5 million what it actually has. And guess who runs that Washington Trust Foundation? Our friend Mr. Issam Omish. Yeah. Well, he doesn't make much for it, but it's so funny that he's the guy that tells us we're all Islamophobes, and he's the guy who hiding $5 million for CARE. And so I told you some about this event controversy we had, and the Fox News program was bad enough, but then this lady came out, Nada Al-Hanouti, who's the executive director of Engage, Michigan. And look who she is. She's the daughter of a former chief of CARE Michigan jailed for spying for Saddam Hussein, right? Her grandfather was an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial. And she, once again, claims speech is incitement to violence. To get this straight, you talk about Islamic terrorism, you are inciting Islamic terrorism. It's insanity. So what is CARE? Well, you guys, a lot of you guys probably know this stuff, but I'll run through it pretty quick. It's created at a secret meeting in 1993 in Philadelphia. It's the U.S. branch of the Hamas Palestinian terrorist group. Nihad Awad, I like this quote. He says, "I am in support of the Hamas movement more than the PLO." He was a student leader in the PLO in the United States before he became a leader of Hamas. Did you know that? That's a communist organization, PLO. It was created by the KGB. It's not an Islamic organization. PLO is a communist organization created by the KGB. He was a communist before he became a quote-unquote devout Muslim. Frankly, I still believe he's a communist.
Where does Arafat fall into that thing?
He was the director of the PLO. He was a communist, hardcore communist. Hardcore communist, yeah. Ian Pachipa, who was the head of Romanian intelligence, he had to deal with Arafat. He's written extensively about Arafat.
Wasn't Arafat also educated in the Soviet Union by the KGB?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was a KGB, basically stooge. Yeah.
That's where they taught him how to siphon $1 billion out of the PLO.
Oh yeah, yeah, billions.
Paris.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's amazing.
yeah. And you know, there's only so much I can put in these things, so we'll be here all night. But you know how, well, wait a minute, let me just see here. Okay, so let me just finish this. CARE officials have been convicted of violent jihad. Here's a list of those who have been convicted. Oh, look at this. A white nationalist. This is Judge Michael Davis in Minnesota, and he tried, I believe, 9 Somali terrorists who had either gone to fight for Al-Shabaab or were trying to go to fight for Al-Shabaab. And that's what he said in the court. We have a terrorist cell here in Minneapolis. Now, most people don't know this. The Somali Muslims in Minnesota were really upset with CARE because they believed that CARE was aiding and abetting those Somali, Al-Shabaab, and ISIS recruiters that found such fertile ground in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And these are some of their public statements. CARE is supporting the groups we suspect of recruiting our kids. We refuse to be silent. At a protest, Somali Muslim protesters said, "CARE out, doublespeak out." This, and then in 2013 there was the Westgate Mall terrorist attack in Nairobi, Kenya, where they asked people if they were Muslims or not. If they were Muslims, they let them go, and if they weren't, they shot them. At least two of those were Americans, Somalis from Minnesota. This is what Ibrahim Hooper said about that. Terrorism, terrorism, whether it's Americans or anyone else. Who cares? Who cares? Can you believe that? He said that. Now this guy, Abduzirek B, his nephew was murdered by Al-Shabaab. He went over and was recruited by Al-Shabaab, but then he had second thoughts, so they killed him. And so this guy testified before Congress, and
I think I've seen him.
yeah, he said, "I tried to warn America," and this is what he says about CARE. They say I'm a bad person, I'm anti-Muslim, I don't represent the Somali community, they lie about my life and try to destroy my character, my capability, and my trust in the community. Does that sound familiar? They do that to their enemies, no matter who they are. They called him an Islamophobe in their 2013 Islamophobia report. So that's CARE. It's a terrorist group that uses subversion and defamation and extensive lawsuits in the United States, which, by the way, they've been trying for years to get the terrorist watch list stopped. And they finally found a judge that agreed with them. So for now, the terrorist watch list can no longer be used because it violates Muslim civil rights.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yep. CARE did that. And they want us to believe that they don't support terrorism. So, and then, of course, we have the two red-green axis poster children. And I could go on for an hour about that one. The other one doesn't require much explanation. She's also a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, which is not Democratic Socialist, it's a communist organization, the largest today communist organization in the country. And for that reason, it's more effective than the Communist Party USA because they can hide behind that Democratic Socialist title. And if you recall, we had that House Resolution 183 after she made initially all those anti-Semitic statements. Of course, she just goes on and keeps making them over and over again. It's amazing. But the first draft of that resolution was very good. It was written by Jewish Democrats, and they described in detailed manner what anti-Semitism was, and they called out Ilhan Omar by name. But of course, when Nancy Pelosi got hold of it, she flipped the narrative. Suddenly, it was no longer about anti-Semitism, it was about anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim discrimination, and bigotry against minorities by who? All of us white supremacists, that's it. We're the evil ones, we're the terrorists. Yeah. Yep. And so that's the game. In 2017, M-Gage, remember M-Gage? It was that Minnesota woman runs M-Gage, Michigan, or Michigan woman who objected to our presence there. Senate Resolution 118, House Resolution 257, both passed, although it took a while for the House one to pass. They were written by M-Gage and the Muslim Public Affairs Council. They're the ones who wrote those. So it's all about Islamophobia. It's all about blasphemy codes, which they are working to try to get passed. Very similar language to UN 1618 and the Mayor's Compact that came out after Charlottesville uses the same kind of language. So, well, we talked a little bit about what is to be done. Well, I want to say something else about the whole, one thing that Rashida Tlaib says over and over again. She talks about Israel as the apartheid state, right? And like everything, these people say, it is the polar opposite of the truth. Palestinian territories and the Hamas-controlled areas, those are the apartheid states. Palestinians cannot buy Jewish land, right? You go to jail if you do. It's very socialist, so they live under a socialist society. The roads are a mess. Under Arafat, and I don't know if it's still true, I wouldn't be surprised if it is, but under Arafat, all the money that was supposed to go, that West provided for aid to the Palestinian Authority, went into his pockets. And in order to make more money, they watered down the gasoline. So anybody who had a car, their cars were breaking down, their engines were destroyed prematurely. They had potholes so you could swallow your whole car. And there was a poll taken, a survey taken of Palestinians living in Israel. What would they do if they were told they had to go to live in the Palestinian-controlled areas? They said they would take up arms. They would take up arms rather than be forced to go live with their brethren in Palestinian-controlled areas. They have full voting rights. They're Arab members of the Knesset. There are even affirmative action programs to help Arabs, Palestinians move ahead in Israel. nothing like that, forget anything like that in Palestinian-controlled areas. And the whole right of return thing, we all know that's a fraud. There are 2 million Palestinians living in Israel today. There were only about 600,000 when the war broke out in 1948 or 47. And what happened with those? They were forced out because the Arabs came in and invaded. They fled for their lives. They weren't kicked out by the Israelis, at least not in most cases. And so the whole right of return narrative is fraudulent. The whole apartheid narrative is fraudulent. It is exactly the opposite of the truth. I always feel it's necessary to point that out because so much misinformation about that. But anyway, so what can we do? Well, I always say, number one, it's really important we have to pray. Because as a nation, we've really pretty much abandoned God. A lot of us as individuals may have not, but our nation certainly has. And that was also a design strategy of the left, but we went right along with it because that's the easier, softer way, right? If we left to our own devices, we choose to live that way. And I like to make the analogy that today we're living in the time of judges. When every man did what was right in his own mind, and we received a judge in 2016. And it just remains to be seen if that judge can do what the judges of old did to save our nation. We need to help in every way we can. Now and everybody wants to know what you can do, but there's no magic pill. There's lots of things we can do, and it's all hard work. I talked about voter registration before, become a poll watcher, become a poll judge. All this stuff is critical for 2020. I mean, absolutely critical. If we lose 2020, we're done. As a nation, we are done. Ken talks about education. In the long run, we have to recapture our education system because that's where all this sickness and twisted thinking is coming from.
But the books are printed by Pearson Publishing, which is owned by Middle East companies. All the elementary school books in
Really?
the nation.
In the nation.
Right, in the
I
nation.
didn't know
And
that.
they're also, there is someone on the task force that approves this. And he's, I think he's an imam. He's part of the group that approves the books.
Right.
Well, the
Wow.
bad news, good news in that they've announced they're gonna go completely digital so they can keep updating and revising history as they go.
And rewriting
But the
history.
good news is, once it's online,
Mhm.
it'll be easier for us to search and push the truth out and get it corrected maybe. Truth?
Well, there is Truth in Textbooks. I'm
Right.
sure you folks have heard of them. They're down in Texas, but they review textbooks and they are able to have.
That's
Fair.
only Texas though, certainly not New York and
No,
not
that's
the
true.
Northeast.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
we've been trying to get somebody to help us to do that for about, 6, 7 years now. We
But
haven't
it
had
might be
anybody
easier when
help
you're
us.
online, because Texas textbooks are online and we're not.
And of course, then the routine stuff, reopen the investigation, the Holy Land Foundation trial, because CARE, if President Obama had not been elected, CARE would be defunct today. They were only unindicted because he was elected and he shut down the investigation. That investigation was ongoing. CARE, many of its leaders, and many other Muslim Brotherhood organizations would have been shut down and defunct. Instead, they had 8 years to infiltrate
Right.
every
Grow.
institution of our society like a fungus. This is an interesting one. Go to shareholder meetings because, if you're a stock shareholder, you can make resolutions. If the company that you have a stock in uses the Southern Poverty Law Center for any reason, for something like that, you can say, I want to propose a resolution that we no longer use this group, and you can present it to, the shareholders meeting. Here's a petition Citizens for Corporate Accountability, that's the group that does this a lot. And they've gotten a lot done through that. There's a petition on there to get Amazon Smile to stop using the Southern Poverty Law Center in evaluating the books and the materials that it sells through that.
You know, I know you're about to close,
Mhm.
you're getting
Yeah.
ready to wrap it up,
Yeah.
but I'm hoping that you could touch on the swamp and what the status is of
Yes.
that.
I will. Why don't I do that? But I'll do that offline here.
Yeah.
So, pick up my book. A lot of my archives are at crisisnow.net. There's a lot of my stuff at the Center for Security Policy website. I mean, I publish all over the place, and frankly, I don't keep up with it all. But I also publish something called the Swamp Report, which you can all sign up for if you would like. I'll put out a piece of paper and a pen, and you put your name and your email address down. And
It's fantastic, by the way.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
thank you. It's once or a couple of times a month, and it's basically a rundown on pretty much, not everything that's going on, but a lot of the things that interest us. And it's, you know, it's a quick read, 10 to 15 different subjects, about a paragraph or two each. Sometimes it's longer than that. Sometimes I go into some deep analysis with it. But, I mean, if you wanted to, with all the links and the videos and all that stuff that are linked in there, you could probably spend a day on it. But if you just read through it, you can get through it 20 minutes, a half an hour. Yes?
I want to ask a question that, I don't think it's off subject. It's close to 2 years since the shootings in Las Vegas, and it's been very covered up. And a number of us have been very suspicious about the Islamic connections. I know the girlfriend of the Stephen Paddock was a Filipino Muslim.
Right.
He traveled to the Middle East. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I do. And actually, if you sign up to the Swamp Report, we also do, I collaborate with Dan Ramada of ACT Cleveland, and we put on monthly webinars. And we've had Trevor Loudon, we've had Alex Nitzberg, we've had a lot of different people. We had what the heck's his name now? He was with the National Security Council, very high up in intelligence, Rich Higgins.
Yeah.
He came on and he spent the hour talking about Las Vegas because they did their own analysis and they like tracked the cell phones of the people who were involved. And it's his belief and it's my belief that there was a collaboration between ISIS and Antifa. Yeah, because the guy, the shooter, was Antifa. He was Antifa.
That doesn't come out.
Huh?
That never comes out.
No, of course it doesn't. They're suppressing all of it. They don't want to alarm people. They don't want to make the left look bad. They don't want to make the Muslims look bad. I mean, I don't know what their motive is. And maybe they're just hiding their incompetence. Maybe they got paid off. You know, I don't know. You know, these are things that we might know if we had a FBI director who had our interests at heart. Right now, we have a guy who's a member of the swamp who's trying to cover everything up. He's trying to hide everything. You know, he's you know, resisting Director Barr's, Attorney General Barr's direct order to declassify parts of the, you know, the Trump-Russia collusion thing.
But Jim, I don't get this. You know, when Sessions got in, I mean, he was in part of the DC swamp, but he wasn't in the DOJ. I thought he was cleaned up because what the hell? It wasn't his DOJ that made the mess. And the same thing with Ray. Ray might have been in the FBI, but he wasn't the director of
Who?
the FBI. Christopher Ray.
Christopher.
Oh, yeah. No, he wasn't, but...
Why not clean the freaking thing out now and take credit for it? What's this?
Well, because I think a lot of these people at high levels, for one thing, they're all on the same page, I think, politically. That's one thing. You know, that's something that I found working in the OMB in the 80s, the 90s, you know. The career staff is leftist. or liberal or leftist. I mean, at that point, they would do their jobs when told to. I mean, I think if there were sensitive things, they might get leaked. I'm certain they would go to congressional staffers, but they knew better than to say anything publicly about it. They would just take it like, you know, they had their own little intelligence agents inside the OMB. But now, they have a lot more to lose.
Besides,
And-
can you say Jeffrey Epstein?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be Arkansas-ed.
Touche.
But so, yeah, I mean, I think that's really the problem. You don't have people committed to doing their job the way we think they should be doing it. I really think that. Yep.
Just a quick question, what was the name of that convert pastor that you spoke about?
Sharam Hadian, Hadian.
Thank you.
Shah Ram. He's an Iranian, former Muslim.
Where is he actually located?
He lives in Washington State.
While we're in questions, you mentioned the Attorney General Barr. Do you
Yep.
think he let Comey off the hook already on a number of things? Is he just window dressing, or is he going to do anything? In your opinion?
Yeah, Ken and I were talking about that before. It remains to be seen.
Can you repeat that question?
He wants to know if Attorney General Barr is actually going to convict any of these people of anything, like
Don't
Comey
hold your
or
breath.
Strzok or, you know, any of them. And, yeah, it looks like they are slowly letting them get away with it. That's what it looks like. And
They have to get Hillary if they go for them.
yeah, right, well, I don't think, yeah, I think she will escape. I really do. But you know, I honestly believe that the reason a lot of that will happen and has happened is because they have the goods on a lot of people. You know, the Clintons have the goods on a lot of people. And,
The ones that are still living.
yeah, the ones that are living, that's right, that's right, no, that's true. And the other thing is that, you know, we've all seen how totally insane the left is, from the very top to the bottom. We've all seen that. Trump is here till 2020, and if we're lucky, he's here till 2024. After that, it's anybody's guess. If they take over, those people who saw convictions of prominent Democrats are going to find themselves, investigated. They're going to find their taxes. There'll be repeated IRS audits of their taxes. People will go after them on any and everything they possibly can. And I think a lot of these people are sort of like thinking, well, am I really willing to, risk that?
They're gonna do it
And they're
anyway.
probably getting warned that that's what's going to happen to them. Because that's the way they play. They are just dirty, they're enemies of our nation. And they're determined to overthrow it. I mean, they're like Soviet agents. They're every bit as bad. Yeah.
You were talking about Las Vegas earlier, you said Antifa
And ISIS.
ISIS.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, ISIS had said something 6 months earlier that they were going to have a big attack.
Right, and they took credit for it.
Yeah. And
Don't say credit.
And the thing is that guy, it looks like, well, first of all, he committed suicide by shooting himself twice. Once in the head, once in the chest, And it's kind of hard to do.
I was told, I saw, OAN had a short thing on this, and they talk about he was left-handed, and somehow he had shot himself with his right hand while he was holding a gun with his left hand.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so the belief is that he was the patsy. There were people in there shooting with him, and a lot of the witnesses reported hearing more than one gun going off at the same time. And when it was all done, they realized jig was up. They popped him and took off.
And you just have another dead angry white man.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, or another reason to seize all our guns. Yeah. Now, there was an alternative theory that somebody posed. I don't buy it. But Saudi prince or Saudi king was on the floor above, and they claimed that this whole thing was a diversion so that they could attack the floor above. But I don't think that ever came off, and to me that doesn't sound realistic. It just doesn't sound realistic. But he had an awful lot of weapons there, an awful lot of ammunition.
Yeah, I was told that was kind of a display of the various types of equipment. There were all kinds of different weapons that were actually on display. And so the different people operating them.
No,
But we solved it, we banned the bump stock, right, so that's over.
Oh yeah, right, we solved that problem. And then there's an Australian guy who's also an Antifa type, who for some reason has never, been investigated. But Rich believes that he is one of the people who participated, because he actually, in this presentation that he gave to us, he actually tracked his phone and showed where it went. They had the information on all the cell towers and all the feeds. It was pretty sophisticated stuff. But so that's that's the kind of thing you can get at the Swamp Report. We have monthly live webinars, and then I put this thing out a couple of times a month.
So what's the status of Trump right now? What is the status of his draining the swamp? I mean, can you give it in a nutshell? Has he been successful at all? Hopeless? Uh-oh.
Very, very, very marginal. He goes ahead in fits and starts. I believe, and this is just my belief because I don't have any inside track, but I believe that when he was first elected, for example, he brought in Reince Priebus to try to mend fences with the establishment Republicans. And Reince Priebus, of course, recommended Johnny DeStefano to be the head of the Office of Presidential Personnel. And Johnny DeStefano was John Boehner's chief of staff. You couldn't have picked a worse person. Johnny DeStefano helped us get H.R. McMaster, and I don't know if you read my article about H.R. McMaster, but that's something worth a read because he is really a questionable character. And he was also doing the bidding of John McCain. And the John McCain's chief of staff is now head of the Special Counsel Office. And the Special Counsel Office, this is not for things like what Mueller did. Special Counsel Office's job is to protect whistleblowers. He's not protecting whistleblowers, he's helping to get them thrown out. Yeah. I mean, one of the guys I know, a guy named Adam Lovinger, who worked in the Defense Department, and he's the guy that found that Stephen Halper was getting paid. Stephen Halper was the agent they recruited to infiltrate the Trump administration. He was getting paid through the Department of Defense. And Adam Lovinger raised that issue and said, wait a minute, this guy, he's not working for DOD. What are you paying him for this for? And he was sloughed aside, and then he was fired, and then he lost his security clearance. And he tried to get a job in the Trump National Security Council, but they wouldn't give him his security clearance back. And so there's that kind of, the munition, there's people like that all throughout the government. The guy who's running the security, who decides security clearances, he should be gone tomorrow. But Trump just learns about this stuff slowly over time, and a lot of it maybe just flies under the radar to him, and other people beneath him don't want to deal with it. He could be better served by his staff. He's very well served by John Bolton, And John Bolton, of course, has a direct connection with the Center for Security Policy through Fred Fleitz, who was his chief of staff. Fred Fleitz is now the president of the Center for Security Policy. So, and I can say there's one success. It was due to the center's efforts that Trump signed that executive order on electromagnetic pulse. And that was the first time any president has done anything about that. It's huge, you know. That's one of those unsung benefits.
So I'd like to mention to
Yeah.
the group that because of Frank, I was successful in coordinating meetings between the CEO of LIPA, Long Island Power Authority, and Tommy Waller, and Frank was supposed to be there. He was called to the White House. And we are working on trying to see what we can do to secure the power grid. And the CEO was so helpful. He gave us
Quiet, guys, please.
all kinds of wonderful news about how we can approach this by changing, adding wording to the transportation infrastructure program.
Yeah.
And so I just want to let you know, we are working on that actively, and that is
That's
a good
great.
thing.
Yeah, yeah. In the back?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something. We were talking about the Jewish vote.
Yep.
Now, is your impression that you're saying that the vast majority of Jews are communists? I just didn't understand.
No, no.
Because I disagree with that.
No, yeah, no, you know, they're like everybody else. You know, if they're liberal, they vote liberal. You know, most Democrats are not communists, but they're voting for communists whether they know it or not. That's the point. The communists are leading that party, and they have been leading it for a lot longer than is generally recognized. And they, you know what it is? I'll be honest with you, this is my opinion also. What's the number one, what's the worst of the 7 deadly sins? Come on. Pride. Pride blocks knowledge. Because when you think you know it, you know, if you're a know-it-all, it's very difficult to teach you anything, you know. And the trouble is, so many people come to the table knowing very little, but thinking they know more than you and me. I face that all the time. I mean, I'm shocked, you know. I do this for a living. If I don't know more than 95% of you guys about what I'm writing about, why the heck would anybody pay me, right? But these people, oh, you don't know what you're talking. Oh, sure. Oh, no, come on. Give me a break. They're the scoffers in Proverbs. They're the scoffers. They're the pigs that will turn and rend you when you throw your pearls before them. That is what we're talking about. Pride.
While you're giving your insights here, we talked about the future.
Yeah.
Hopefully Donald Trump is reelected.
Yeah.
And we hold I call the demo communists day for another 4 years. But Mike Pence seems to be a really decent man. Where does he really stand in all this? I don't know if you have insight on all these people.
Yeah, I have opinions about it. You can judge for yourself whether they're insights or not. He abandoned Mike Flynn instantly.
Wow.
When
Didn't Flynn work for Turkey though as a
yeah, but they all do that. They all do that stuff. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was juggling a perception that he might become the National Security Council director and trying to maintain a business post-retirement. And who could blame him?
Well, Turks are bad guys.
Well, yeah, but that's a different reason to be opposed to it as opposed to him doing something wrong, because it's something they all do. It's something they all do. And the fact that Pence ran away from that, just like that, and disowned him. I mean, Pence is a guy, he's a Christian, he's an honest man, he's an honorable man, I guess, but when he faces political pressure, he folds like a cheap tent.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what happened to him when, remember when they tried to pass a, what was it, an anti-gay marriage thing in Indiana when he was governor? They came after him and he just flipped. He didn't even fight it.
Yeah.
So that doesn't bode well for,
No.
4 years?
No, we don't want, I don't want Pence to be
What about
president.
Cruz
I want to find,
24.
I want to find another Trumpian.
Do you think Trump will get another vice president?
No, I don't. I mean, Pence has served as a loyal vice president, I will say that for him. You know, he stood by Trump, you know, and that sometimes, that's a hard thing to do, I can imagine. So, but he stood by him and been loyal to him, so I think he's doing a great job as a vice president, frankly. But I don't think he'd do a very good job as president. He'd be too much of a wheeler-dealer with Congress, and he'd let them get away with all the stuff.
Time for one more, if there is one more.
Yep.
Linda,
Las
nice
Vegas,
to have you back, by the way.
Yeah.
Las Vegas shooter being Antifa,
Yep.
have they established a tie between Antifa and Obama? Because it was kind of billed that Las Vegas was really a left-wing hit
Yeah.
that was designed to get gun control rolling.
Well, frankly, I think a lot of them are. I think, for example, the Christchurch massacre was, you know, he was a national Bolshevik. How many people know that? He was a member of the National Bolshevik Party. And guess what their platform is? Their goal, they're people that have inspired some conservatives, quote unquote, who think Putin's a Christian and who think Putin's going to be the savior of the West. And they're joining in a grand alliance with the left around the world to overthrow the West. That's the platform of the National Bolshevik Party, which was created by Alexander Dugin, who is a Kremlin insider, and Richard Spencer. You all heard of Richard Spencer, you know, the white supremacist. Richard Spencer is a National Bolshevik. He's gone to Russia, and his wife has been a translator for Alexander Dugin's stuff. So these guys, it's not what it seems. And the Christchurch shooters manifesto, you can still find it if you look. He lays it all out. Our goal, my goal in doing this was to provoke a war in the United States between conservatives who want to keep their guns and the left who wants to take them, and to provoke a civil war in the United States. And that goes right in with the National Bolsheviks' plan. And he has National Bolshevik symbols all over everything, all over his backpacks, in his manifesto. And another interesting thing, the manifesto of the El Paso shooter was very similar. You remember it had that weird combination of left-wing ideas and you know, anti-immigrant ideas, and then some left-wing anti or pro-environmental idea. I mean, it's just a crazy mishmash. Exactly, and he said he was an admirer of the Christchurch shooter. And I don't know if he's actually a formal member, but the Christchurch guy was, and I believe that Christchurch shooting was a
Obama, what about the
Russian
Obama tie-in?
influence operation. What?
Yeah, the Obama tie-in, what about that? He a Bolshevik too?
Well, he is, frankly, but
Look who his mentor,
but
look who
he's
his father
separate.
was.
But
look who his
he's
mother
got
was.
his own network of stuff. He doesn't have to collaborate with them. He's on the same page.
All right, so listen, thank you so much.
He supports him by